How does the creative fire of the zenith become so easily drowned by the silver sheen of liquid lead? I can still remember when I actually believed in the innocent beginning. I can remember the warmth of that creative fire. Well, before the cold set in, before he dragged me onto that stage, before the Baron completely destroyed me. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something a bit different. We're descending straight into a truly terrifying internal abyss to unpack the dark Fichtean dialectic found in the fall of Baron von Nixt. The alchemical calcination, a Fichtean fable. To really wrap our heads around the Fichtean dialectic, which is basically this ultimate cosmic clash between the self and the undeniable void, we have to look at a grim-dark fable. We're going to examine exactly how Baron von Nicht achieved absolute cynical knowledge. And spoiler alert, to do that, he literally had to destroy his own innocent humanity. For any student of existential philosophy out there, this is an absolute masterclass in how self-overcoming can just curdle into profound stagnation. Let's draw a stark contrast between two simultaneous realities happening here. On the left, you've got the Baron's physical reality, the laboratory of nothingness. It's a sterile, monochrome space, just filled with unresponding walls and blinking telemetry screens. He's been sitting there, watching the Wanderer, observing from afar, but his calculated patience is just totally exhausted at this point. Now, on the right, look at the horrifying, vivid psychodrama he initiates inside his own mind. It's staged in this grand, empty auditorium filled with weeping actors and overseen by a king in jester's motley. The Baron realizes that, clinical observation just isn't cutting it anymore. To understand his enemy, he has to stage his own internal execution. And the whole reason he's doing this? He's desperately trying to decode the absolute I. This is the fundamental, unyielding resistance of the sovereign, a being whose veins literally run with burning copper. The Baron knows for sure that he just cannot understand this level of raw, defiant energy from a safe distance. So what does he do? He turns his instruments inward. He decides to descend directly into the raw, messy material of his own consciousness. So he sets up this incredibly dark alchemical workspace. Picture this. He's arranging these delicate, blown glass vials upon a massive slab of cold obsidian. But here's the really crucial point. He is not seeking life-giving gold or some kind of beautiful spiritual transformation. No way. His goal is so much darker. He is actively trying to distill the absolute purest essence of stagnation and true cynical knowledge right out of his own mind. To pull off this psychic autopsy, the Baron relies on three highly specific philosophical reagents. These liquids are basically the physical, distilled reductions of his own philosophy. First up, we have black bile. This stuff is harvested from literally decades of watching dogmas fail. Then there's liquid lead, which is designed to induce a perfect, unbreakable psychological freeze. And finally, we have a highly volatile colorless acid, meant specifically to burn away the mechanism of embarrassment that usually protects the human ego. He is literally weaponizing his own cynical intellect against himself. Now, sitting right alongside those terrifying vials are these brittle, yellowed vellum scrolls. But don't be fooled. These aren't holy texts. They are literally ledgers of negation. Written in this cold, clinical, geometric script, they detail the absolute mathematical certainty of universal decay. They hold the formulas for pure nothingness. They even detail the exact weight of a dead god and the precise coordinates where all human memory just dissolves into forgotten data. It's classic nihilism, but engineered into absolute mathematical certainty. Which, naturally, leads us to ask, what actually happens when a mind deliberately executes its own identity? Well, to kick off the ritual, the Baron pours all those alchemical reagents into a single, heavy, leaden chalice. They hiss and curdle into this opaque, completely light-devouring void. By drinking this dark concoction, he is intentionally triggering a highly controlled trauma within his own psyche. He's literally forcing his conscious mind to take a front-row seat in that empty internal auditorium we talked about earlier. And the visceral horror of what happens next on that stage is almost hard to stomach, especially when viewed through my eyes, the eyes of his discarded humanity. I, the phantom of his younger self, the enthusiastic seeker who once genuinely believed in the innocent beginning and the creative fire, I'm dragged out under the stage lights. Weeping, I'm bound to a stake by the phantoms of the three kings. The king in jester's motley directs the whole nightmare, laughing bitterly as the Baron's oldest, purest ideals are revealed to be nothing but pathetic little jokes. And the Baron, he doesn't weep, he doesn't recoil, he just sits there and bathes in the internal violence. dryly accepting it as a necessary purge of his remaining human blood. So what exactly are the weapons being used to execute his innocence here? The cynical wit, standing there in his blood-stained motley, uses the undeniable truths of cosmic pointlessness. First is the entropic flatline, which basically argues that any internal fire is just a temporary voltage spike before universal death. Second is the futility of fire. This frames the sovereign's internal flame not as freedom, but as a self-constructed torture device just meant to drag out the inevitable extinction. And third, compliance with gravity. The idea that every single step forward is just you filing your own record into cold, windowless calculations. These are completely toxic, fatal truths that make self-overcoming curdle into a permanent punchline. Now, here's the thing. The most dangerous part of this cynical knowledge isn't physical force, not at all. It's what the sources call the mechanism of embarrassment. It attacks your fundamental will to create. It just lingers there in the back of your mind until your noble striving becomes embarrassed of itself. It paralyzes you with the sudden realization that all your efforts are nothing but echoes whispered into an empty grave. I mean, this is far more lethal to a metaphysical zenith than literally any external enemy could ever be. To complete this brutal, psychological ego dissolution, the Baron conducts a methodical, almost surgical psychic autopsy. Let's walk through it. First, he drinks the void. Next, he drags his own core memories to the internal stage for execution. Then, as he unrolls those scrolls and recites the geometric theorems of nothingness, it acts like this hypnotic burial rite. With every single theorem he reads, another room in his psyche is permanently boarded up, its windows painted pitch black. And finally, he hunts down any small, hidden pockets of hope or terminal nostalgia, and he injects them with a freezing void of perfect data. This agonizing alchemical calcination achieves exactly what he calls the Great Subtraction. The chaotic, messy, emotional friction of his own human being is systematically reduced all the way down to zero. And this right here is the absolutely crucial turning point. He looks out from his internal stage and realizes the universe is just a completed calculation waiting to be cleared out. He no longer merely administers the laboratory of nothingness, he becomes the absolute void itself. He willingly becomes the very soil that catches the fallen. Physically, this clash of philosophies is just stark. On the left side, we have the sovereign's life force, veins practically bursting with burning copper, representing resistance and the blazing fire of the absolute eye. But on the right, look at the Baron's transformation. When he finally opens his physical eyes back in that sterile room, his veins are completely still. The life-giving blood is entirely gone, replaced by this sluggish, freezing silver mercury that carries absolutely zero warmth. The lead and mercury perfectly tragically represent his total, irredeemable loss of humanity. And his eyes, they've transformed too. They haven't turned to ash. No, they've become two flat, totally unreflective mirrors. They are perfectly suited to gaze into the deep, uncanny forest, because they are completely undistorted by human pity or awe or anything really. Armed with this true cynical knowledge he just dredged up from his calcined psyche, he smiles this terrifying, frozen expression. It's literally the smile of a corpse. He is now completely ready to adjust the parameters of the lower gorge, turning it into a perfectly mirrored reflection of his own empty auditorium. The Baron has engineered the perfect trap. He fully intends to force the Wanderer's internal flame to face the absolute unyielding proof of its own futility, which, of course, sets up our Fichtean synthesis with a massive looming question. How on earth does the Wanderer's internal flame, the absolute eye, possibly survive this perfectly engineered freezing pressure? Like, how do you fight an enemy that has quite literally become the void itself? Well, the answer is nothing short of magnificent counter-mastery. You see, the sovereign does not attempt to argue with the nihilistic logic of the void, because doing that would only grant it power. Instead, as the text reveals, he uses the absolute certainty of defeat as his primary fuel. Having already digested the punchline, the sovereign treats the freezing pressure of cynical negation as the exact resistance he needs to compress and intensely magnify his own internal fire. He literally takes the toxic truths of the creed of negation and burns them. And so, I want to leave you with this to ponder. When the abyss hands you the undeniable, calculated proof of your own insignificance, will you allow the mechanism of embarrassment to freeze you into mercury? Or will you use that absolute certainty of defeat as the fuel to burn even brighter?